When a prize stallion collapsed at a bustling livestock auction, most assumed it was exhaustion, or worse. But when a seasoned veterinarian rushed in and suddenly collapsed beside the animal, the crowd froze. What lay hidden beneath the stallion's body would unravel a chilling mystery no one was prepared for, and expose a secret that had been buried for years. The air shimmered above the dust as the crowd pressed closer to the auction ring, cowboy hats tilted forward, sunglasses pushed up against the relentless glare. The auctioneer's voice rang sharp through the speakers, words snapping like a whip. Lot 112, Black Andalusian Stallion, 5 years starting bid at. But the sentence never finished. The horse buckled, not a stumble, not a slip. His front legs folded like paper, and his hindquarters crumpled beneath him, the ground catching his fall with a hollow thud. For a split second, no one moved. The stallion's flank heaved violently, foam clung to the corners of his mouth. His eyes, wide, glassy, rolled upward, and then stilled. Gasps surged through the bleachers. Some stepped back, others leaned in. From the sidelines, a woman shoved through the crowd, clipboard under one arm, stethoscope bouncing against her chest. Dr. Leah Winslow, late 50s, steady hands, sunburned skin, boots worn smooth from decades of emergency calls. She didn't hesitate. "Carl, help me roll him, now." 2 handlers rushed forward. Leah crouched low, hands moving fast, checking pulse, breathing, gum color. Her lips parted, confusion, concern, and then she froze. Something beneath the horse, just barely visible through the churned dust. Her breath hitched. She blinked. Hard. 1 second, 2, then her face turned white. She swayed back on her heels, eyes still locked beneath the stallion's body. Her fingers, once precise, now trembled. She stood too fast, stumbled, clutched her chest. Is she rasped, staggering backward. I know that mark. Her knees gave way. She collapsed. The crowd, already tense, broke into chaos. Call an ambulance. Get her water. Move the horse. Move him. The auctioneer dropped the mic. Security scrambled over the gate. A medic sprinted in from the vendor tent, radio shouting in his back pocket. Dr. Winslow lay curled on her side, gasping, her fingers twitching against the dirt. She wasn't unconscious, but she wasn't okay either, not by a mile. Meanwhile, the handlers tried lifting the stallion's massive frame, sweat pouring down their necks. He didn't resist. He couldn't. But the moment they shifted him, someone screamed. A young woman, mid-20s, clipboard still clutched in her hands. She pointed with a shaking finger. Under him. There's something, oh God, there's something under him. The dust, now disturbed, revealed it in patches. A strip of cloth, red, a smear of something darker, wetter, a sliver of pale, curled bone. Silence fell again, but it was different this time. Heavy, cold. Someone whispered, "That's not a horse bone." And just like that, the auction ring wasn't about money anymore. It was a scene, a question, a panic wrapped in heat and dirt, and the sudden sense that nothing was what it seemed. The first man who reached the stallion hesitated, not because of the weight, but because of the stillness. Horses don't fall like that, unless something inside them gives out, and even then, they fight. This one hadn't. He'd gone down like he meant to. 2 more workers joined, grabbing the thick leather halter and the flank strap. One of them, an older handler named Roy, muttered under his breath, "Something ain't right." They strained together, shifting the massive body just enough to slide a plywood board underneath. That's when the dust gave way. It wasn't subtle, a wet sound, like fabric pulling free from mud. The blood hadn't dried yet. A bundled shape emerged from under the stallion's belly, curled tight like a dropped duffel. Blankets. No, not blankets. Layers of canvas rotted at the seams and soaked through, stained red. One corner was torn open, revealing pale, twisted limbs, not equine, human. A scream tore across the pen. A young assistant, clipboard still in hand, dropped it and backed away so fast she tripped, landing hard. "Oh my God, oh my God, that's her." Voice broke. She scrambled to her feet and ran. Someone shouted for security. Another person vomited behind the announcer's booth. The crowd surged forward, and then recoiled all at once, like a single creature unsure whether to look closer or run. Inside the ring, silence returned, except now it pressed in, thick and unbearable. Roy knelt beside the bundle. He didn't touch it, just stared. His voice was hoarse. That horse, he laid on it, covered them. It wasn't one body, it was two. The first was smaller, youth-sized, the second longer, legs curled unnaturally, a hand protruded from the bundle, fingers bent in a final, desperate grasp. The stallion, though still weak, twitched, one ear flicked toward the bundle. A sound, deep, low, almost like a moan, rose from his throat. Not pain, something else, grief. The paramedics wheeled Dr. Winslow toward the fence on a stretcher. She sat upright now, face pale, lips pressed tight. She looked at the bundle, her eyes darkened. They used him, she whispered. The medic beside her blinked. Used him for what? She didn't answer. Someone called the sheriff's office. Another phoned state animal control. Cell signals dropped in and out as people scrambled to send video, photos, something to explain what they'd just seen. The auctioneer was silent. His microphone lay forgotten in the dirt. By the time law enforcement arrived, yellow tape stretched around the ring, and the stallion, still alive, barely lay quiet beside the horror he'd hidden. A horse had fallen, yes, but not from exhaustion, from protection. He hadn't just collapsed. He'd chosen to cover what no one was supposed to find. The flap of the medic tent stirred gently with the wind, but inside, the air was thick, cottony lay stale, pressed in with the weight of what had just unfolded. Dr. Leah Winslow sat upright on the cot, an IV in her arm, refusing to lean back. Her skin was pale, eyes sunken, but alert, too alert. She kept glancing toward the auction ring, as if needing to see it with her own eyes again to believe it hadn't just been a heat-stroke-induced dream. A young paramedic hovered beside her. "Ma'am, your blood pressure's still. Get me a deputy," she said, voice flat but firm. "Now." The paramedic blinked. "You passed out. You should rest." "I didn't pass out," I remembered. 10 minutes later, Deputy Caleb Morris stepped through the tent, hat in hand, expression tense. He was young, but not green. He'd seen bad things, but not like this. "Dr. Winslow," she motioned to the chair. "Sit down, and close that flap." He did. Leah leaned forward, voice low. "You'll need to pull an old case file. It was sealed, about 6 years ago. Owner's name was Randall Hoyt." Caleb frowned. Hoyt, from Southridge. He moved around, used shell farms, flipped property every 2 years to keep inspections at bay. "That stallion out there, he was listed as euthanized, under the name Tayton. But that's not what happened." She took a slow breath, hand gripping the edge of the cot. "Hoyt brought him in with chemical burns on his flanks. Said it was a fencing injury, but there were puncture sites, traces of IV sedatives. I reported it. The next day, the horse disappeared. The paperwork vanished with it." Caleb shifted. "You're saying this was covered up?" "I'm saying someone made it disappear. That horse, he wasn't just abused, he was used, tested on. I tried to push the case, but I got a visit from a state rep. They said it was over. For my safety, they said, best to move on. So I did, until today." She stared hard at the deputy. "When I saw him collapse, I knew, not by the brand, not by the build, by his eyes." Caleb nodded slowly. "We'll need to get that file unsealed. You'll need more than that. Check missing persons, ranch hands, local foster kids, even volunteers." Hoyt ran a clean front, but the horses weren't the only ones disappearing. Outside, the stallion stirred again, covered now with a tarp, flanked by 2 officers and a vet tech, breathing, barely. Caleb stood. "You think that horse laid on those bodies on purpose?" Leah didn't blink. "He was trained to obey commands, but what he did, wasn't training. That was memory." She leaned back then, the weight of years pressing into her chest, and memory doesn't die easy. By nightfall, the auction ring was no longer a place of commerce. It was a crime scene. Floodlights lit the enclosure with harsh, artificial clarity. The dust, once kicked up by hooves and boots, had settled into a still, uneasy silence. Yellow tape rippled in the wind. The crowd was gone. Only officials remained. A mobile forensic unit arrived, just after dusk. White van, no sirens, just quiet authority. Technicians moved with grim efficiency, stepping around the stallion with reverence. The animal had been sedated, and laid on a canvas tarp, just outside the ring. His breathing was shallow, monitored, fragile. The bundle beneath him was no longer a mystery. Gloves peeled back the rotted canvas, layer by layer. until the truth stood raw and undeniable. Two sets of remains, one clearly human, small, with partially fused bones, young. The second set, more fragmented, animal, a canine jaw, possibly a farm dog, possibly not. The dirt was tested immediately. Blood had soaked through to the sublayer, still fresh, still warm when the stallion collapsed. No attempt had been made to bury them deep, just enough to hide, just enough to delay. Inside the tent, a forensic anthropologist laid out a partial femur on a sterile cloth. This one, she said, turning it in the light, has a clean fracture and signs of surgical intervention, maybe pins at one point. Whoever this was, they'd had medical care. She glanced at the sheriff. You said a boy went missing from a foster program 3 years back. Sheriff Dean nodded slowly. Jacob Ellis, 11 years old, broken leg, 2 months before he vanished, ran off from a ranch up near Grover's Hollow. That place was owned by Hoyt at the time. Silence. The anthropologist looked again at the bone. You'll want to pull his dental records. Across the lot, another team was scanning the stallion with portable UV light. What it revealed made even the seasoned vet tech pause. Faint scars crisscrossed his chest and inner thighs, not accidental, precise, surgical, along his left hind flank. A tattoo, once black, now faded to blue, a series of numbers, no name. Dr. Winslow stood nearby, arms crossed tight. That's not a brand, she murmured. That's a lab ID. One tech looked up. Military, private sector, off books. They swabbed the stallion's wounds, logged each mark, and clipped samples from the base of his mane. The more they examined, the clearer it became. This animal had been modified, tested, not just hurt, but studied. Sheriff Dean watched from a distance, jaw clenched. They buried those bodies under him, hoping no one would check. Figured the horse wouldn't survive the trip. Dr. Winslow didn't look away. They didn't count on him remembering. She stepped closer to the stallion, lowered herself beside him, and touched his shoulder gently. You protected them, she whispered, even when the world didn't protect you. Somewhere deep in his chest, the horse let out a long, slow breath, and for the first time that day, he looked at her. He hadn't spoken a word all day. No bids, no clipboard, just stood near the back row, arms folded, sunglasses on despite the shade creeping over the stands. Tall, lean, face too clean for ranch work, too still for casual interest. He blended in, until someone asked him a question. Sir, did you come in with the transport crew? He didn't answer. Sir, then he moved, not toward the voice, but away. Fast, down the bleachers in 3 clean steps. One man shouted, another grabbed for his sleeve, and caught nothing but air. The silent figure ducked behind a vendor tent, vanished through the rear fencing, and was gone before security reached the gate. Get the tapes, the sheriff barked. They did. Later that night, in a cramped office behind the fairgrounds, 4 men stared at a grainy screen. The footage showed him arriving just after dawn. No trailer, no gear, just a rental car, and a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He didn't check in, didn't talk to anyone, but he watched. Every pen, every horse, especially the stallion. Zoom in, said Deputy Morris. The screen flickered, then focused on the man's boots. A logo, faint but unmistakable, burned into the leather heel. 3 curved lines, 1 vertical slash. Dr. Winslow inhaled sharply. That's the Vequis mark. Sheriff Dean frowned. That's what? She stepped forward. Vequis Biogenetics. They ran a private livestock facility just east of Barrow Ridge. Said they were developing gene therapy for equine disease resistance. But there were rumors, implants, neuroconditioning, even behavioral rewiring. Morris glanced at her. You said it was shut down 2 years ago. Federal raid. Animal rights whistleblower tipped off the DOJ. Dozens of horses seized, some too damaged to save. She paused, others just disappeared. Dean turned back to the screen. And now this guy shows up wherever those horses do. They ran the footage through facial recognition. Nothing, no matches, no name. But when they widened the search radius, Texas, Wyoming, New Mexico, patterns began to emerge. Other auctions, other collapsed horses, always preceded by the same man. A ghost moving through systems not built to track ghosts. He's not selling, Morris murmured. He's monitoring, Winslow added, or retrieving. Dean's jaw tightened, which means someone's still running this. They reviewed one more clip, a shaky video from a Utah livestock fair, posted anonymously 6 months prior. It showed a stallion foaming at the mouth, bucking wildly before collapsing.
The same figure stood nearby, same posture, same boots, and the same expression. None. Sheriff Dean stood. I want APBs across all state lines. Check every lab shut down in the last 5 years. Cross-reference with transport logs. If he's back, someone's bankrolling him. Dr. Winslow looked again at the paused frame. The man's face was still unreadable, but in the horse's eyes just before he fell, there had been something else. Fear, and not of the crowd, not of the noise, of him. The stallion didn't move much the first day, not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. His eyes stayed half-lidded, tracking sound, not motion. Every hand that reached toward him was met with a long stare, not defiance, not trust, just calculation, like he was measuring risk, waiting for something. Dr. Winslow sat with him every hour she could, her voice soft, steady, never forcing touch. By the second morning, after a mild sedative and a clean splint change, he shifted, not away, but toward, just a lean, just enough. Good boy, she whispered, palm grazing his shoulder. By afternoon, he stood, wobbly, thin, but upright. Someone tried to guide him with a lead rope. He didn't respond, not to pull, not to coaxing, but when Winslow clicked her tongue twice, low and sharp, he turned, walked, slow, precise, a path he chose. The sheriff called it in. He's moving, not sure where to, but we're following. Through the side pasture, past the fence, across dry scrub. The auction yard faded behind them. The stallion walked like he knew the terrain, avoiding glass, weaving between abandoned crates, stepping over tangled wire, as if he remembered every inch. Not a wander, a return. He stopped at the edge of the property, beside a rusted livestock trailer, half swallowed by tall grass, and the skeleton of a broken fence post. No plates, no markings, just old black paint and dry rot around the seams. The stallion stood still, head lowered. Dr. Winslow approached first, flashlight in hand. The trailer's back gate hung loose. Inside darkness, then the glint of metal. They opened it slow. A cooler, empty syringes, rubber-tipped restraint chains, and a weathered black duffel, half-zipped. Inside the duffel, dog tags, 3 sets. One belonged to a teenager who'd gone missing 2 summers ago from a group ranch in New Mexico. Another was labeled Test B7 Delta. The third had no name, just a stamped serial code. Next to the bag, tucked into a plastic storage bin, was a journal, handwritten, neat, cold. It listed dosages, reactions, obedience scores, and names, 16 in total. The last one stopped Dr. Winslow. Winslow L. Consult requested, declined. She didn't speak for a long time. Sheriff Dean leaned over her shoulder. They wanted you involved. She shook her head. Not involved. Silenced. The stallion let out a breath behind them. It wasn't a sound of pain, more like release, as if some unseen weight had finally been dropped. Dr. Winslow turned back to him. You remember, she said quietly. You let us hear. He blinked, slow and deliberate. She stepped closer, resting a hand just beneath his mane. You didn't forget. Neither had they. The arrests came quietly. No sirens, no drawn guns, just plainclothes agents and unmarked vehicles, moving like shadows through the outskirts of 3 states. Names pulled from the journal, properties watched for weeks. One by one they were taken in. Ranchers, transporters, former employees of a lab that was never supposed to exist. Randall Hoyt was the last. They found him holed up in a borrowed trailer, off Route 19, shaving his beard in the mirror. When the door came off its hinges, he didn't fight, didn't speak, just stared past the agents, as if already calculating who might still be out there. The press caught wind by the weekend. Illegal equine experimentation ring busted. Missing youth case tied to auction house horror. But what the headlines never captured, what they couldn't, was the look in Valor's eyes. When Dr. Winslow came back, he stood at the far end of a wide paddock now, shaded by cottonwoods, and watched over by volunteers, who'd stopped asking questions and started listening. His coat had regained its sheen. The scars hadn't vanished, but they no longer defined him. They were part of his story, not its end. When Leah approached the gate, he lifted his head. No flinch, no hesitation. She didn't call him Titan anymore. That name belonged to the past, the one they tried to erase. Now, he was Valor, because when everyone else had turned away, he had laid his body down over the unthinkable. Not out of instinct, not out of fear, but choice. She brought apples. He liked them crisp and cold, peeled by hand. She did that now, as she always did. settled beside him in the grass, speaking in low tones he didn't need to understand to feel. "Thank you," she whispered, placing the slice in his open palm. "You didn't just survive, you spoke." He nudged her shoulder gently, lips brushing against her sleeve, a gesture so small, so sure, the world would forget. Headlines would fade, the labs would relocate, rebrand, systems would shift, but never fast enough. But here, in this quiet field, where truth had finally surfaced, something had changed. Not just a horse saved, not just a crime exposed, but a reckoning unearthed, brought forward not by shouting, not by violence, but by the silent collapse of a creature who had carried more than pain. He had carried proof. Dr. Winslow stayed until dusk, the sky bruising purple above them. Before she left, she brushed his mane one last time. "You're safe now," she murmured. Valor didn't move. He didn't need to. Some part of him already knew. If this story moved you, don't scroll past it. Valor didn't have a voice, but his silence exposed the truth. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life inspired stories that uncover the strength in survival and the courage in quiet heroes. No, so long. Share this story to remind others. Sometimes, the ones who can't speak reveal the loudest truths.